Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron Channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, we're going to talk about the question, is this the best way to change your body composition? Before we get into that topic, if you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. The best topic ideas I turn into videos. And just as a note, I'm joined by FAZLIFTS. FAZLIFTS, you can find them on Instagram at FAZLIFTS and YouTube at FAZLIFTS, and you also got a podcast. How's that going? You still rolling with that, Faz?
Yeah, had a podcast going for the past 4 years, so still rolling on that. Every Friday, new podcast episode. So check it out. It's on all the major podcast platforms, just YouTube, FAZLIFTS.
FAZLIFTS. All right, so let's talk body composition, changing body composition. To set the table before we dive into specific methods, the method we want to talk about, I want to move off the table a couple of things. Number one, the fat bulk. We're not going to be discussing fat bulks. We don't advocate fat bulks. Aggressive bulks where you gain probably over 3 pounds a month are basically just fat gain programs. And I would also like to add before we dive into this that fat loss. Faz, just a quick question, because this has been on my mind lately. I find that if clients come to me for straight fat loss, they have a harder time sustaining fat loss than lifters that are already into a healthier lifestyle. Have you come across that at all? Do you find that to be the same?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at what the majority of people who are unhappy with their physiques tend to do, it's usually the opposite of what you and I recommend, which is they spend the majority of the year cutting, and then what happens is once they reach their goal or reach a goal, or they just get sick of it, they binge and bulk back up again. So the majority of people out there really do the exact opposite of what is the optimal strategy, and that is they spend all their life just cutting, endless sort of cuts which never really end and never really go anywhere, and then once they reach their goal or they get sick of it, they just like splurge. Now, what we're saying is actually you need to throw that on its head. You want to spend the majority of your year either at maintenance or in a bulk, and not a fast bulk, a lean bulk, and then spend short periods of time cutting. And I think, Steve, would you agree with this, that our strategy more closely lines up with physiologically how easy it is to lose fat compared to how hard it is to gain muscle and the rates we need to do that? Would you agree?
Yeah, it's I find it the muscle building process is obviously very frustrating for many, and it can take some time. My clients that are involved with this type of program, they're bulking at least 10 months out of the year, and they're improving their body composition. So it's not wizardry. To reference Faz's program, The Wizard. I believe it's called The Wizard, right?
That's right. Full body. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's dive into that. When I got into lifting Faz, I did a long-term bulk, and I didn't do it on purpose. I just lifted and ate for 2.5 years. So let's set the table. You are someone that's at a pretty good body weight, meaning you're not underweight. You're not specifically overweight. You're kind of in that middle ground. Talk about your methods, Faz, of bulking and cutting, and how you would help them improve their body composition.
Okay, so assuming we've got somebody, like Steve says, who's relatively average sort of body weight and body size and body fat, I think, and they're underdeveloped, so they've got plenty of room to grow. I think the first thing to do is set them in a small calorie surplus. And I would encourage, if you're skinny fat, to actually go on a lean bulk first. Now, assuming you do that and you optimize your training, your sleep, which is a big one, people rarely talk about, optimize your intake for the day. So it's make sure your protein is at a reasonable level and the rest of it is made up with whatever you want. Then I think if you're doing all those and you're getting stronger on a consistent basis, you're going to be able to gain muscle and strength relatively fast at a reasonable rate for quite a long time without getting to the point where you're unhappy with your body fat. And that's the key. Okay. Ultimately, you cut when you're unhappy with it. So what I want to do is I want to be showing we're on a long, reasonable bulk where we're gaining just a little bit at a time. The difference between being, say, at a 300 calorie surplus relative to a 600 calorie or 800 calorie surplus is not much. It's more a case of how good you feel. So at a 300 calorie surplus, you feel pretty good. At a 600 to 800 calorie surplus, you might feel good meal to meal, but by the end of the week, you're probably feeling quite tired. And I think the difference between a 300 calorie surplus and just maintenance or main gaining, there's quite a big difference there as well. So I'd rather somebody be in a small surplus for days on end, weeks on end, months on end, and get the benefit of doing that rather than just being at maintenance. It's possible at maintenance, but you're going to have a far easier time with a slight surplus. And you can also just ward things off of not gaining too much body fat and just do that for a while. It gives you great results.
So to set the table and kind of, clarify things a little bit, let's say you're 200 pounds and, you want to improve your body composition, but you don't want to go up to 230 pounds to do so. What I typically do with clients is I will have them bulk for 3 or 4 months. Typically, the target is a good 4 months of training, gaining 1.5 to 2 pounds a month. And whatever they gain over that 3 or 4 month period of time, then we do a quick mini cut where we kind of detrain. We don't push heavy on for PRs. We back off any intensity techniques, supersets, drop sets, whatever. We kind of detrain a little bit and take a little bit of mental break from pushing in the gym. And we just cut the exact same amount of weight off that we just gained. So you start at 200 pounds. Let's say you bulk for 4 months. Your goal is to gain 1.5 to 2 pounds, but with a little water weight, you get up to 210 pounds.
Yeah.
So then we do a quick cut, drop those 10 pounds, and we get back at it. What happens is you repeat this cycle over time. You stay at the same weight. Your body composition slowly improves, and you don't get fat. You actually get leaner over time. And you get to bulk most of the year. You get to eat a little extra most of the year. It's kind of a win-win.
Yeah, now it sounds like a great scenario, and obviously it sounds like the ideal scenario that everyone should do. So let's talk a bit about like where people go wrong with this. And I want to just kick this off with, firstly, I think training being optimized is a massive thing that I see going wrong, because I think generally when people are come to you with fat loss goals, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to say, Steve, especially if they are fat loss clients, they're not lifters who want to get a bit leaner. If they're fat loss clients, like specific, a lot of time, it's just lifestyle clients. They don't necessarily understand the importance of progression in the gym. And even the guys who will watch us and watch this channel, I think there's a certain proportion who won't really understand how much they need to push the training and how effective training needs to be. And we make videos all the time, and I do, about people changing their routines at a drop of a hat, not pushing hard enough, not actually quantifying the progress by sticking to the same group of exercises. So these are all mistakes that people make over the course of like 6 months of bulking. And then at the end of it, they've gained mostly fat and they say the technique doesn't work. So I want to just hyper-emphasize, I want to hear your point on this, Steve, is hyper-emphasize the role of optimal training, really, really good, effective training. What is it and how do we quantify it?
Yeah, that's a very good point. One of the things I've said many times over the years that if your training isn't in place and your training isn't correct, any calorie surplus is simply a fat gaining program. So the foundation, just like the foundation of a house, is if you do not have a foundation in place of good training, then it's just a fat gain program. So it's extremely important that during this time you have laser focus. This isn't it sounds good on paper, Faz. We get to eat in a calorie surplus most of the year, and this sounds like unicorns and rainbows, but you actually have to be hyper focused. Your nutrition has to be very consistent. You need to nail it so the scale weight's moving, but more than that, your training has to be in place. You can't be, unsure about the program you're on. You have to be sure about the program you're on. You have to be ready to dig in during this duration, and you have to be ready to attack, because if you start getting that thing, well, I just saw this program on the internet and I wonder if I should change, or you're just, you're not feeling ready, like you got something going on with your shoulder and you're not giving it or whatever, you're best off to kind of put it into maintenance mode for a while until you get your head on straight. Is that reasonable, Faz?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think in terms of practical strategies that you guys can use at home, I would say the first sort of 3 to 6 weeks, I probably wouldn't even encourage people to gain weight. I'd probably say take those first 3 to 4 to 6 weeks to establish excellent form, establish working hard at a reasonable sort of maintenance intake. Now, when you're getting close to all-time, or at least all-time local heavy weights, then that's when you should bump up the calories and then see the growth and let those calories push the extra strength, push you into sort of PR territory and whatnot. So I think you've got to be very careful about that. And also those first 3 or 4 weeks will give you a chance to ensure that any changes you need to make to the routine, any exercises that need to be substituted out, any small changes to the split that you don't like or you don't agree with, you could fix those. So you have a base of a routine. And I'm not saying stick to the same routine for 6 months, but at least the base of the routine is somewhat similar and quantifiable so that you know whether you're progressing or not. So you have that base set, and then you add the calories in, and then you enjoy 5 months of just growth. I think people need to really figure that out, because oftentimes what happens, Steve, is they'll start a new routine and then they'll start bulking, and then often they'll change the routine after 3 weeks. It's a waste, because they're training, sure, but they're not in anything close to all-time poundages or even local highs. So if that makes sense, like I just see people changing routine far too often. So I want to see them work hard on a routine, solidify where they're at, get to good poundages, and then add the food in.
Yeah, one thing about coaching and even self-coaching is if you're not bought into the program that you're involved, you've already lost. You've already lost, because the program won't matter as much as how much you work the program. So if you start doubting, like if I have a client that's working with me and they start doubting my methods and asking about another coach, we're done. I pretty much have to let them go. Now, Faz, I want to end with this. I mentioned the fact that this requires a lot of precision. If you're going to change your body composition, you're going to be training hard. You're going to be monitoring calories so you have a consistent intake over time. This requires a lot of precision and a lot of attention to detail. Now, if somebody out there is watching this going, that's way too much detail for me, that's way too much monitoring, I got to track calories every day for 18 months to change my body composition, I got to do this, there's too many rules and too much structure. If they're sitting there and thinking that they can change their body composition without that structure and without that precision, they're completely cracked. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think it's important to lay down sort of an agreement on what you're going to track. And there are certain minimums. So for me, the absolute rock bottom minimums are going to be body weight regularly, at least 3 times a week. Now, I will say I don't necessarily mind if they're not tracking macros.
Right.
I will guide them on an eating approach, but what I want to see is the proxy for those macros is the body weight. So what is the body weight doing? And the other proxy is strength gains. So at a bare minimum, let's say my most awkward clients, who are like busiest clients who just don't want to track very much at all, the rock bottom minimum will be body weight and strength, because with those two, I have a proxy for whether the weight's moving in the right direction, as in whether they're gaining tissue or not. And then with strength, I have an idea of whether their muscle mass is increasing or whether fat is going up or whatever. So it gives me a reason. That's the minimum proxies. In addition to that, I think macros and calories are a very good addition. I think pictures are a good addition. Measurements are a good addition. But the rock bottom proxy for the busiest / laziest of clients would be body weight and strength. And that's a reasonable proxy, but more information, more data is better. And if it's your body and you're invested in it and you've paid the money, then why not, right? So.
No, I agree with you 100%. I will say in the world, we both do coaching, and I adjust this to the client because
Yeah,
every client is different. And at the end, the results are the point and not
yeah,
the way to get there, obviously. Um, but I don't want people thinking they have to micromanage macronutrients and plan every meal and weigh all their food and all that kind of stuff. It's really not about that. The
yeah,
bare minimum, like Faz said, is that we see consistent movement on the scale. We see a direction for the weight. We see consistent progress in the gym, plus ones or strength
yeah,
progress. Um, and I would say one of my big things is consistency with nutrition. There can be some daily variance. You don't have to weigh your food. But if you're having 3,300 one day and 2,000 the next day, it's going to be like, come on, let's tighten the shot group just a little bit.
As an interesting aside, I mean, this is one of the ways I found out very early on in my coaching how you could tell if clients were being honest with their macros. Because if the macros are listed as very same all throughout the week, and then you have these massive weight spikes up and down, that gets you thinking, well, something's going wrong with your macros there. So
Yeah.
the clients who they say they're eating the same stuff all week, but there's massive fluctuation in the weight. These are little tricks that we can tell with experience that we know something's going wrong. And yeah, I generally don't support huge fluctuations in calories on a day-by-day basis. I don't think there's a great argument to say there should be any massive fluctuations, certainly not for 1,000 calories at a time. The one last thing I wanted to say was before we shoot off is quantifiable strength gains or quantifiable progression as a whole. I think ways that you can set that up is stick to at least a pool of small exercises. I've talked about this in one of my first videos on YouTube, was having markers of progression. So maybe 3 exercises, just 3, 1 push, 1 pull, 1 something for the lower body, in which you're going to definitely stick to for the next 6 months and use those as markers of your progression. Everything else might change. The routine structure, you should stay the same, but exercises come in and out. But those 3 big hitters, they'll be your, be all and end all. Have I progressed or not? And so something like a weighted chin, a weighted dip, and a squat. Those are great examples. A bench press, a bent row, and a deadlift is good examples. Just 3 lifts that you can use as a minimum where you can actually demonstrate progress over 6 months. Otherwise, you might be in a situation where if you change your routine and your main movers every 6 weeks, then you don't really know if you're making progress, even if you're going up session to session, because you might just be rebuilding strength. I'm very big on that. I think people do that a lot. They just end up building strength back up to where they were previously and call that progress, but it's not. So you have to see long-term progress.
So, Faz, my last thought, and I want to get your thoughts on this, and we'll get out of here. For anybody watching, they're like, okay, great. I get your bulking and cutting. I get what you're doing and all that kind of good stuff. But how long is it going to take me to change my body composition to a point where, I look better? What I typically aim for is 18 months is a good reasonable goal to start changing your body composition. That sounds like a long time, and I want to get your thoughts on this fast. But you can do a lot in a year, there's no doubt, especially if you're really training hard. But let's say you're the 200-pound guy, you're a little bit fluffy. Let's say you have 160 pounds or 150 pounds of lean body mass and 50 pounds of fat and 25% body fat percentage. 18 months is kind of 4 cycles in my world of bulks and then mini cuts, bulks and mini cuts. What you're going to do over that time is 18 months or kind of 4 of these cycles is you're going to wake up the same weight at the end of the road, 200 pounds. You should be maybe about 20 pounds lighter in fat, and or maybe 15 pounds lighter. 15 would be good. Lose 15 pounds of fat, gain 15 pounds of muscle. That'd be great. Even gain 12 pounds of fat, lose 12 pounds of muscle. That's more realistic for someone in 18 months. Even 10 FAS would make a big difference in how you look. But you got to play the long game, body composition. Occasionally, a big hitters that can nail it in 12 months. Yeah. But I kind of have a minimum of 18 months. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a really good point, and it's a point that a coach would make. Like, it's a point that somebody would make who's worked with a lot of people. And I'll tell you this: those big transformations you see on Instagram. Like, I've got a load on my page as well. They're all fat loss transformations. They're usually from people who have built a good degree of muscle alongside a lot of fat, and I've managed to chop off, say, 20, 40, 70 pounds of body fat, and they look dramatically different. But to actually change your body composition, gain muscle, lose fat, that takes time, particularly gaining muscle. And especially, I find the older you get, the more people are stuck in their ways, stuck in their habits. They find it harder to change. The muscle gaining aspect of it takes a lot longer, and you're banking on at least a year to gain significant amounts of muscle tissue to really look different. Fat loss transformations, yeah, you've seen loads on Instagram, but as I say, they're all fat loss transformations. Very few of them are gaining 10 pounds of muscle in 3 months. It just doesn't happen, even with the best drugs. So yeah, I completely agree. I think you're looking for a long-term plan to ensure that you're trying to gain maximum amount of muscle tissue while minimizing fat, and having certain periods of the year where you're really doubling down on the fat loss, which is exactly what me and Steve are saying. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, and when you mentioned earlier how difficult the muscle building process was and how important it was you train hard, we both know the natural muscle building standards, how much you can build per year and how the rate of decay and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the real issue is, like, most people don't come close to building the muscle they should because their training is not in place. So you really need to take your training seriously. All right, guys. So that is it. Faz, I appreciate stealing 20 minutes of your life. Guys, please head over to YouTube, FAZLIFTS, and follow Faz, and head over to Instagram and follow Faz on Instagram, FAZLIFTS. His name is right there. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Thanks, Faz.
Take care, folks.